This is Changemakers with Katie Gore, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
I'm back with changemaker Mariah Hayden. We've been discussing her inspiring journey to leading New Life Village, an intergenerational community in Tampa, Florida, that's designed to support families raising foster to permanency and kinship children who have survived abuse, neglect, and trauma, offering them program-rich, below-market housing and on-site wraparound services. Mariah, as you look to the future, what are the next steps for expanding New Life Village? And tell us how you can grow this transformative community model while preserving the close-knit relationships that are so fundamental to its success.
So we know what we want to do for phase 3, and I'll get to that in a second. But the question is, do we want to build more homes for these families? And I'll give you 3 different answers. If you ask the county affordable housing services, yes, build 200 more units. Build as many more units as you can fit on the property. If you ask the fiscally minded people, the money guys on the board, yes, more apartments is more revenue, more money for the organization. If you ask the staff, and if you ask me as the executive director, we are at our limit with families. And the reason for that is as you mentioned, we lose the program, we lose the neighborhood of feel, we lose relationships if we get too much beyond 200 residents here. There's actually a number, Dunbar's number, about how many relationships we can responsibly hold in our lives. And it says the number's about 150 people that you could have valuable, meaningful relationships with. And so a lot of these other communities are built with that number in mind. They don't want to exceed 100 residents. We're way past that. We're 170 right now. And what that means is everybody who lives here has to be background checked. Any guests that are here for a regular basis have to be background checked. Everybody needs to be safe and participating. They need to know each other's name. There needs to be, you don't just pay your rent and mind your own business here. You need to be involved with the program and your neighbors in the community. Now, there's varying degrees of that, of course. But if we get to serve 300, 400 people, we lose all that. We just become an affordable housing community. And our founder, our board has always been clear. It's mission first. We're not in it to be affordable housing. We're in it to get kids healed into permanency. The way that we do that is by way of affordable housing. If we can take the housing burden off of these families and give them housing stability, they can focus on the healing, the children being on a campus that's not, where there's no stigma for them being foster adopted. We can focus on the other things. But it's mission first, housing second. So if you ask me, and most of the staff, we don't want to serve more families. Now, what we do want to do in phase 3, our program is pretty robust. We need a building that actually is built for our program. We need an art therapy room. We need a music room. We need a large event space that can hold 100 people. We need real conference rooms and real offices. We are in what was the leasing office, and then the rest of the staff is in a modular, like a portable building across the street. We need a facility that can support that. Now, we do want it to be mixed use. So stories 3 and 4 would have 1-bedroom units. So that's where there's an interesting story. Who are the 1-bedrooms for? So if we build this and we build about 20 more 1-bedrooms, that will bring our population to between 200 and 215. The 1-bedrooms are for two sets of people. The first would be our senior citizens. Our senior citizens want 1-bedroom studios. They don't want 2-story, 2-bedroom townhouses where they have to walk up and down the stairs. So to expand our senior population and to give them something that works better for their stage in life, we want to build 1-bedrooms for them. That will free up the 2-bedrooms we have now to serve more families. Part 2 of that is when we build these 1-bedrooms, we want to start a 3rd program. And that 3rd program, I'm calling it an adulting program, but it would be for our youth that's transitioning into adulthood. So youth that have lived here for a couple years and they need to learn how to adult, right? So now they have a 1-bedroom. They're paying, $400 or $500 a month in rent. They now have to volunteer and take budgeting classes and either be in college or have a job. So we want to be there for our youth as they transitioned up to like the age of 25. that program will have a resident assistant. So think of like a college atmosphere. So there's an RA down the hall that's keeping an eye on them, but teaching them to advocate for themselves and really teaching them how to adult. So phase 3 will include, think of a 4-story building. The first 2 levels of the building are that administrative program space. And then the 3rd and 4th story would be those 1 bedrooms with like community rooms and a community kitchen and such.
For this phase 3 campaign, how are you packaging financing? Is it the same model where you're doing state, federal, and private, or are you having to pursue something different to make this happen?
I think we're going to approach it with the same plan, but intentionally. So right now the project looks to be about $8 million. And we have actually 2 buildings we want to build. So the whole project would be $16 million, but we're going to take 1 building at a time. $8 million, give or take, with maybe $1 million contingency. So the first thing we would do is make the rounds with our private donors from before. They were very impressed that we were able to do what we said we were going to do, stay on time, stay on budget. So we think that there's potential there. Then we will go to the county and the state. And in the last 6 years, 7 years, we've really built our brand in the community. So now we are a recognized player in affordable housing. So we've caught the attention of a lot of banks who have those community credits they need to fund. So we'll talk to the banks. We didn't have any major bank funding the first time. And then some of the bigger family foundations and bigger corporations, I think like Raymond James is interested in our project and some other organizations like that. Now that we've built a brand and a reputation, I think we can cast a wider net to go after some of these corporate organizations, family foundations, and banks.
Kind of changing the conversation here just a little bit, but focusing in on what you guys are doing so well in the trauma-informed programming here. A lot of people in the affordable housing domain are just starting to understand and have discussions about this, not just with children, but families and veterans and a whole host of people that are being served. Tell us what is so crucial for this healing and development component to what you guys are doing. What are some of the ways people are impacted or some of the techniques that you guys are using?
Well, partnership, I think, is really the first technique. And one, it's positioning ourselves to be partnering with these families to help them accomplish their different goals. It's really easy for a lot of us to say, oh yeah, homeownership, everybody should want to own a home. Well, we have to be sensitive to the trauma, the generational trauma that somebody may have come from. This isn't discussed enough, but poverty in and of itself is trauma. If you grow up in a poverty family, if there's generations of that individual, and we do have several of those here at the Village, that individual isn't thinking about homeownership because nobody around them has ever said, hey, that's a possibility for you. A lot of us who do own homes because our parents owned homes and our aunts and uncles and our grandparents. We were told it was a possibility and a goal to work toward. So it's understanding where people are coming from, helping them understand new possibilities for themselves, for their families. The other thing, so when our original board said, hey, let's do this, they thought, and it's kind of funny saying it out loud, that we were going to have a bunch of middle-class families that want to live here with good credit. That's crazy. We're a rental community in sort of an industrial area of town. That's not who's going to show up here. Folks that are going to show up here are going to be lower income. They are going to be renters. That dream population that they dreamt up in the beginning, those folks own houses. They don't necessarily need our community. So that was the first lesson is, okay, we are going to attract a low-income community, and therefore we need to provide a lot more services and assistance for that. So our program really started to build there. The second big lesson I think that we learned along the way is, everyone comes to New Life Village because they want to serve kids that have been abused and they want to make a difference in kids' lives. And that's great. But the population that actually takes the most of our time and effort and attention is the caregivers, because the caregivers have tons of trauma that has not been addressed. So we had to start recognizing adult and caregiver trauma and putting resources in place to help them recognize and understand what they've been through, because there's nothing worse to raise a triggered child and a triggered adult, right? And so we started having a lot of support groups, a lot of how to raise traumatized children, how to understand your own trauma, your own ACs, journaling sessions, group therapy sessions, support groups around the caregivers. So really our strategy is to really support the caregivers, and then they understand how to make different financial decisions, how to set different goals, healthy eating, self-care, all these sorts of things that are then going to strengthen them raising the children that have been through trauma. We, of course, have lots of programming just for the children, but that was a lesson we had to learn along the way. Everything isn't going to be child-focused. We need to support the caregivers as well.
Wow, that is powerful. And there's so much in when you dive deep into the awareness and then understanding how you impact some of that layered with the mental health support. That is a real good reflection on how you could stabilize kids, but you have to bolster these caregivers. What an impressive model of delivery that you guys are doing. And, are you seeing some people now who have moved on, some of your 22-year-olds going into college and moving on with their lives? Like, are they reflecting back and giving you feedback, or do you see it and they don't have to say it? Like, what's some of that post program feedback that you get?
Honestly, we need to reach out to a lot of the younger youth that have lived here that have gone on to college and other things. I think they're busy in college or doing other sorts of things. We do know about probably 10 or 15 families have gone on to homeownership. So that's something we definitely know. And that's awesome because they were able to save money and get things together to buy a home. It is on our list of things to do to reach back to some of these youth to say, hey, how's it going? Where are some of your outcomes here? I'll be honest, we've just been trying to catch our tail and keep up with operations. Most of our program growth has been because there's a storm going on around us and we're like, okay, this is how we need to pivot. This is what we need to do. This is what we need to grow into because the environment that we're in is saying that's what we need. Very little of what we've done, aside from the capital campaign, has been planned. It's been, okay, this is what's needed now, so let's make it. Hopefully, as we get into the next decade of being here, we can slow down and be more strategic and think about the things we need to do. But and one of the biggest feedbacks we get often is people don't know your name. People still don't know who New Life Village is. Tampa is a huge market for nonprofits. We've got some really big fish here that get most of the attention for nonprofits. So what we really try to do when we can get it in, and we're just now getting some really good lobbying and consultants in this space, is building our brand and marketing in the community, which is going to help us bring more donors. Our success stories, a lot of families do stay here for a while, 8 to 10 years. So it's watching the kids in the community grow and get stronger and go to high school and go to college. Some of them go to the military. Other success stories we see are children that come in and they're very fearful. They've been abused. One particular story I have is a grandmother came in with her 3 grandchildren looking for housing. The 4th grandchild had been killed in child abuse. And I remember when they came for the tour, the kids they didn't even want to let go of grandma's leg to use the bathroom. We're fast forward 5 years, grandma has been able to adopt them. They had to get through the murder trial. They had to just go, a lot of therapy and all of this progression, but the kids have come a long way. They are out on the campus on their own. They're doing well in school. We just took them on a trip up to Tallahassee to learn the political process, and they're not glued to grandma in fear anymore. So those therapies, those activities, those field trips, the family support plans, all of that stuff, seeing that impact those kids and the caregiver. Grandma needed a lot of our support as well. That's one of the unique things we face here is when a grandparent is starting over and raising children, that's hard. You plan for your retirement to be taking cruises or being retired, and these people are starting the clock raising children again. And so they need special supports for that.
Wow. This continuum of mission first, affordable housing, stabilizing, and then healing and growing it is such an amazing continuum for such a dire need. This scenario you just described really touches so much of what people are seeing in affordable housing, seniors raising grandchildren, all of these components. And it's something that I think as a society, every city and community is really going to have to take a heartfelt look to say, what are we providing? And if we're not providing, are we going to accept the consequences of this? How would you coach or speak to what cities should be doing here? Because you're doing it, it can be done. So what would you comment to that?
So the Generations of Hope is that organization I was alluding to earlier. That's sort of the parent organization that is inspiring communities like this around the country. And like you said before, our population pairs able-bodied seniors with foster adoptive kids, but they have other examples where you might have able-bodied neighbors with disabled veterans or teen moms or young adults with disabilities. This is actually a concept that Europe has been doing for a long time. And we're just kind of learning and implementing it here. They have examples in Europe where might be an assisted living facility that's partnered with the daycare. And so the seniors get to interact and play with the youth. And it's healthy for the seniors, it's healthy for the toddlers. There's another example, a European example, where college students who need that really affordable housing will live at an assisted living facility. And their task is to be a buddy or a surrogate grandchild to one of the seniors, and they take them to their doctor's appointments. They go to lunch together. So it's looking at populations that can serve each other for a greater synergy, for a greater purpose. And that's a really cool concept. I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of them pop up. They're just very smart. There's a lot of efforts, especially with a conference called Generations United, to put multiple generations together. Now, from a society, from a city planning perspective, from a public health perspective, I think it's the same concept. Like when we look at health, we separate physical health from mental health. No. They all work together. What your physical body's doing impacts your mental health and vice versa. As a society, we keep trying to silo everything. You go over here for the diabetes doctor and over here for the mental health doctor and over here for the foot doctor, but it's all one body together. And there should be integrative and holistic perspective on the whole thing. So you can't look housing. If you go to healthcare conferences, housing is the foundation of healthcare. Goes back to the conversation with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't really think about, am I getting my annual shots? Am I getting my annual physicals? Am I seeing a therapist if you don't have safe housing, right? Safe housing and food are the bottom of that pyramid, but they all build together. And so the more government and academia and healthcare look at the integrative whole, I think that's where you find more of the solutions. You're seeing more efforts in schools and to do that. You're seeing more effort in businesses. I'm attending a big symposium tomorrow about mental health in the workplace, right? So that's a conversation we weren't having 10 or 20 years ago. But the more we realize how everything is connected and have systems to support the connectivity in the whole, I think we'll get to better solutions. You got to stop siloing everything and separating everything.
I think of some triggers that I've had in my own life. I remember every time my car would make a clunky sound, or I would just overcourse correct and freak out. But it was linked to being stranded on the road when I was young, and we were driving poor clunkers and we couldn't get to places and we couldn't go. And it was just this constant cycle. And it took me a while to learn that was a past trigger to insecurities. If you think of that magnified as it relates to food, housing, healthcare, school, I mean, all of these places are so connected, and you don't realize when you're having this over freak out moment to something that is allegedly small, but it goes deeper than that. And I like how you're describing how the housing component And the poverty trauma is linked to all that. And we're just unpacking all of that right now, aren't we?
Yep. There's a wonderful TED Talk. It is on our website. The woman who gave the TED Talk, her name is Dr. Nadine Burke. And I think she's now the Surgeon General of California, but she did a huge study on trauma and the longevity of its impact on healthcare. And she uses this great example when a child faces trauma, and all of us do to some extent, but there's some that's worse than others. There's some that's compounded. So if you look at children in the foster care, they had multiple traumas. Just being removed from your biological parent in and of itself is a massive trauma, but think about all the circumstances that led to that removal. And then for a foster child, oftentimes they're moved from home to home to home. Every time they move, that's more trauma. That's more trauma. So it's a big onion with layers and layers and layers. But what Dr. Burke pointed out is, when you're a kid and you go through trauma, it teaches your brain, your synapses, your personality, that's similar to what you're just saying with that childhood experience with the car, that every time something bad happens, there's a bear chasing you in the woods. And we go into this because we're still very caveman. We're not that far away genetically from where we were as cavemen and women. And so we go into that fight or flight. It's survival mode. So now if you have enough trauma as a youth, your adult personality becomes one that's very reactive. Oh my gosh, everything is a bear trying to get me in the woods. What's really become scary with that is it teaches your body to constantly be pumping high amounts of cortisol, which is not good for your health, which is why people who've been through a lot of trauma have a gloomy outlook for healthcare unless there's a lot of intervention and awareness. But you're constantly reacting to things like there's a bear in the woods trying to chase you. And so unless there's interventions, which is what our program tries to do, to teach you about your trauma, to understand, okay, I'm reacting like there's a bear. There's not a bear. You know what I mean? And even as an adult, we tell ourselves that helps us to understand and reshape our synapses, which is possible, but very hard work, and to teach ourselves to respond differently to adversity or the car that won't start or whatever. Because what happens for trauma youth is every time things don't go, I'm not going to say the way they wanted, but the way they expected or the way they planned, your body starts to freak out. Oh no, fight or flight, I'm in danger. And life is full of things not going the way you planned. But if your early youth taught you that things not going the way they're supposed to makes me unsafe, then you carry those reactions into adulthood.
Just listening, your personal journey and what you're doing on the day-to-day, you really have become a driving force for what you're doing. How has it been just reflecting on that journey yourself?
I forget. I forget everything that's happened, and when I'm reminded, and when people appreciate it or say, "Hey, that's something special that you've been through," or "That's something special that you've turned your experiences into," it definitely helps me feel grateful. In my time having difficulties in mental health post birth of my child, I met a lot of people with severe mental health issues, and I will say that I'm very lucky. I'm lucky in that I've found resources to get better. I found the possibility to get better. And I found that having difficulty in mental health does not mean it's a life sentence. But I'm lucky that I found the right people, the right circumstances to get better. There's a lot of people who aren't given credibility. There's nobody who has less credibility than a mental health patient saying, "I don't feel well." I'm very blessed. I'm very lucky. And I'm humbled because some higher power is showing me, hey, this is where you're going to go with your life experiences and your talents. And this is where you're going to make a difference. Not everybody gets the opportunity to put to work everything bad that's happened to them, all their career experience and all their education, and use all of those things in a job. And I think I'm really lucky that I get the opportunity to do that.
Mariah, thank you for taking the time with us. I've been talking with Mariah Hayden, the Executive Director of New Life Village.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Changemakers with Katie Gore. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.